Good evening. I am Borough President Antonio Reynoso. First, I would like to take a moment to thank Raju Man for his service to the city as Director of Land Use for New York City Council. Raju was instrumental in moving so many important development projects through the City Council. He always sought ways to address meaningful concerns that were raised during the land use process without sacrificing critical public and private investments in almost every neighborhood in New York City. Raju will be missed, but we look forward to what he will do next. And I just want to personally thank him for his work. He was very helpful to me as a council member, and I'm extremely grateful for the work that I did with him and his sage advice on many times that supported me and really helped me through the land use process in the city council. So I'm really grateful to Raju. Tonight's Uniform Land Use Review Procedure, or ULURP, public hearing will be conducted via the WebEx video conferencing platform. On the agenda this evening are two applications currently under review by my office. Please note that this virtual hearing is being recorded to comply with the public law for transparency. Viewers may join the hearing via the link and password on the following slide and request to testify via the WebEx chat function. We will also accept testimony by phone from those who would like to call in. If you plan to join by telephone, please mute all other devices when called to testify. This will ensure that your testimony is received and recorded. Finally, viewers may submit comments to Ask Reynoso at brooklynbp.nyc.gov for my consideration. We remind viewers who wish to testify that you must enter your name in the WebEx chat and state intent to speak on the application. After the question and answer portion, following each presentation, we will call speakers in order of chat requests. Please call the first item and let us begin.
Calendar item number 1, 280 McDonald Avenue rezoning, 210174 ZMK, and 210175 ZRK.
This is an application by the Jackson Group pursuant to Section 197C and 201 of the New York City Charter affecting 4 lots on the north and south side of Avenues S between Lake Street and McDonald Avenue in Brooklyn Community District 11. The applicant seeks a rezoning map amendment to change the project area from M1-1 and R5B districts to C4-4L and a zoning text amendment to establish a coterminous mandatory inclusionary housing area. These actions would enable an 8-story mixed-use building with 18,783 square feet of commercial space and a 3,953 square foot childcare facility and 66 apartments. Approximately 16 units would be affordable pursuant to MIH Option 1. The development would also provide 67 accessory off-street residential parking spaces. Community Board 11 voted to approve this application on June 9th. Would the applicant's representative please state your name for the record and present this application?
I would be happy to. My name is Eric Palatnik, and thank you very much, Mr. Borough President, for having us this evening. Your entire staff for facilitating the meeting. And you did such a great job introducing the project that there's not much left for me to say. You outlined all the salient points of it very well. I think one of the saddest things I heard during the presentation was that Raju Man is moving on, which is definitely a big loss. So thank you for alerting me that. I did not know that. You could pull the screen back up, though, whoever's controlling the screen, and I'd be happy to spend a few minutes going through the presentation. We're really happy to be here tonight for this. We've been working at this project for 4 years, and I don't see the screen up, but I'll start describing it while the screen is being prepared. Does somebody have control over the screen?
Just give us 1 minute.
All right, good deal. I saw it up there a moment ago, so take your time. I'll describe what's going on. While the screen is up, Mr. Borough President, I'm happy to say that we are here with the extreme support of Community Board 11. This property rests squarely within Community Board 11's district, and we have been meeting with them for more than 3 years now. We've met with them twice a year, every year. The development you see in front of you is, in fact, a development that reflects their input, both in its size, its scope, the uses that are within it, and the MIH, which I will correct is proposed to be at option 2, and that's also been discussed with them as well, and I'll go through that in a second with you. I'm also happy to describe to you and let you know that we've struck a deal with 32BJ, which will be the union that will be operating the building services for the building. We're also excited to say that we commit fully to minority women-owned business enterprises as being substantially involved in contractors that are minority women-owned business enterprises to the fullest extent that we can, and have them substantially involved in the development. The development, if it was approved, is going to take a property that I'm going to show you in a few minutes. It's a rather derelict-looking corner of Avenue S and McDonald Avenue on the southern end of McDonald Avenue, almost before you hit Coney Island. And we're asking you to allow us to construct an 8-story, 85-foot tall mixed-use residential building. The building is designed, you can see here, the setback, just on the very top image there, you see a setback. That's a function of what's called the C44L zoning district, which is unique to McDonald Avenue. It's designed by city planning to accommodate development along McDonald Avenue rail corridor as being the elevated train. It's important to note that we rest right above a subway stop as being a transit-oriented development. And the reason this is taking root so well is because everybody has recognized now, of course, that the technology has come a long way with windows and sound attenuation and air filtration, and buildings can now rest against the tracks and the highways, and the residents do not have disturbances within. So the C44L zoning district that we're proposing is designed to allow that setback that you see there, and the building to sort of step away from the tracks to allow more light and air into the street below it. And I'll go through the development now in its entirety. At the bottom of the screen, I'd like to point out that's the side street. The top of the screen on the right, on the top, represents McDonald. The front represents Avenue S, and the bottom screen represents Lake Street. This property takes up a full block front of a corner. I'll go through this in greater detail, but the design of the building, as you could tell, has been crafted so that it tapers down along Lake Street. Right down, you see the green awning there. That's where the daycare center is. And even the building to the left of that, that's still within the development. But that's been designed to reflect a townhome. Again, keeping the smaller scale of Lake Street at play, and that's what's been discussed with the community. That side of the street is also where the residential entrance will be, and again, that's no accident. And there'll be no commercial fronting Lake Street, only the daycare. Again, that was done with the input of the residents, of the community board, and of their committee. Next slide, please. This just tells you who the group is. It's named the Jackson Group, if you may have come across them before. They own quite a few properties around the city. They're best known for rainbow shops, or some of their more prominent properties that they own, but they own quite a few. And they're local New York City people, and they're anxious to build in New York City and stay in New York City. Next slide, please. This just gives you a pretty good depiction for what I was speaking about before. If you wanted to give it a quintessential shot of New York City and Brooklyn under the tracks, this is it. You can see up top, the property is shown on the left-hand side, the top screen there. It's the yellow building. It is now being utilized by a yeshiva that is being given a quote-unquote sweetheart deal from the owner of the property while they are awaiting redevelopment to the site. That yeshiva is building their own facility and is relocating right now. You can see the building is shown there on the left side. On the top, it's a one-story yellowish looking building. It's also shown on the bottom screen there. The top right shows you what the area looks like, where the building is. Next slide, please. Yeah, this gives you a pretty good understanding for exactly more where the property is, and on McDonald Avenue. Of course, the line running up and down the screen is the elevated train, and the property rests right there. And as I was telling you before, behind the property, smaller scale, and of course on McDonald Avenue, well, that's McDonald Avenue. Shiva Magen David is situated right there, a few blocks away. And down the block further to the right of us, along Avenue S, you can see some taller buildings. So we could accommodate a much taller density, much more density than is there right now. And that's why we're thankful for you accommodating us on the request for this. Next slide, please. This just gives you some more imagery for how tall some of the buildings are around us. Again, our building will rest at 85 feet. You can see here that there are other buildings. The yeshiva is at 83 feet at the bottom of your screen. On the right-hand side of your screen, there's another school that's at 90 feet, but there's other buildings that are 62, 63. And of course, you can see the train is right there, and you see we're right on the train station. Next slide, please. This gives you an idea for what the proposed rezoning area would be and what it would look like. The area is marked in red. The left side represents what it is right now. The right side represents what it's proposed to be. You'll notice up top it says a proposed rezoning. It uses the language R5B and M11. So there's both districts. Just to orient you, the portion that's the R5B right now is that little triangulated red portion that's shown in each of those images. Obviously, it's an R5B district, and that's the area that's being affected there. Of course, when we're done, as you can see here, a portion of the property will still be within the R5B district. Next slide, please. Just gives you an understanding for what's existing right now. I think you should be fairly familiar with it. What's proposed on the right-hand side, and so forth and so on. I think if anybody is extremely knowledgeable in these statistics of zoning districts, it's the borough president. So I'll move on to the next slide, please. Next slide. You don't need to spend much time here. I know you're busy, but you have a busy agenda. I'll go through the plans with you for a few minutes. You can see here is the building. Next slide, please. This gives you a good breakdown for how things are going to work. There are 67 parking spaces proposed at the cellar level. They will be valet. The first floor is a residential and community residential lobby, as well as the daycare, and there'll be commercial that'll front on McDonald and Avenue S. The residential rises above, as you can see, various units on each floor, up to a height of eight floors, and it steps back and has a playful sort of design to it. The portion that you see on the right side of your screen that's at 4 stories, or 3 stories, or really 4 stories. That 4 stories, it is 4 stories, not really 4 stories. It is 4 stories. That screen, that side of the page, is representing Lake Street. Remember, I said we developed the property in design and discussions with the community, and reflects the smaller nature of Lake Street. Next slide, please. Gives you some understanding for the units. You can see this building steps down as you get higher. The footprint gets smaller, and floor 8 is in the lower right. Next slide, please. And, this gives you a pretty good idea here for what the MIH levels are. Remember, I spoke before. There was a mistake. I don't know how that got miscommunicated, but we are at 80% AMI. I recognize that there is a big push, a strong push all around to be at lower AMI levels. This has been discussed, and it was felt that 80% would be appropriate here. But of course, we recognize that different people have different opinions on things. In any event, we are proposing to provide 22 permanently affordable units. You can see here, and our consultant of the 66, so approximately a third of the 30%. But of course, as you know, it's not based upon a unit count, but rather on a floor. So it just happens to work out here. And I'm not going to go through the income bands here. You know them better than I. We'll be happy to answer any questions afterwards. Anna is here. She's our consultant, and she'd be happy to answer any questions alongside me. Next slide, please. And this just gives you more specifics. And this is Anna created this. Next slide. Just wanted to speak to the energy efficiency. I know that the borough president is extremely interested in making sure that we are not a contributor, or at least minimizing the amount of wasteful energy, as well as rainwater, runoff, gray water, and things of the like. So obviously, we've got all of the basic things that these days has become quite commonplace. But by the time the building is built, we believe the electric rules will be put in place. The building will probably end up being a fully electric building. We haven't looked at it that way yet, but we would imagine it would be by the time it's constructed. The building is not obviously going to make any 421A required deadlines or anything like that. So we won't be getting any tax abatements that we need to be speaking about here. But that's, we of course will be using bioswales, we'll be using green roof. In this case, it'll be a white roof in the areas that we're not utilizing. Next slide, please. And I think I've just about covered everything. The remainder of the slides are going to get more into some of the technical natures of the application. I think we're better off at this point, for your sake of brevity, if you'd like to ask us any questions, and we can come back into any specific slides, or we can answer any questions you may have. I'd like to thank you very much for giving us the time to present our application.
Thank you, Eric. Eric, I guess I'm going to get straight to the parking.
Yeah.
How many spaces do we have on the site?
60, just going to go back to it, I'll misspeak, 67 spaces. And it's for
for how many units?
66 units. We're over parked.
And why is that? Can you just justify the need for that amount of parking?
We're in this. Well, first of all, we have the space. That's number one. That's number one.
First of all, what? I couldn't hear that.
I'm sorry, I apologize. We have the space to provide it. That's the first thing. The second thing is it's a very big request in this portion of Brooklyn. When I come into the community boards here, as well as in Community Board 15, we are repeatedly told that this is not necessarily entirely like the rest of Brooklyn, and that the residents, in addition to using the trains, that we hope a lot of the people will do, that a lot of the residents also rely upon vehicles and own vehicles. So it's been asked to provide the parking. We're in this sort of a conundrum because we know there's a strong push to eliminate parking. We would like to recapture the parking spaces ourselves for commercial use, of course, or residential use, but you can make money from that. But that was a request of the community, and we're trying to honor it. We'd be happy to honor it, but I can understand if you have a different position.
I do have a different position. We're in a housing crisis, not a parking crisis in this city. So
I agree.
we won't say that 100%. I guess you'll get my recommendation when the time comes, Eric. But I'm very concerned with a project um, who that is being proposed to have a significant massing, specifically because it sits adjacent to a train station, right? Like we're specifically um, targeting uh, locations near subways and public transportation so that we can go higher and we could build bigger. Um, and the justification is the train station. So you can't, I feel like this project is trying to have it both ways. And it's extremely concerning to me that you would be next to a public transportation system and have more parking than is necessary or more parking than we're even asking. You have to pick a side, or this community board is going to have to pick a side. But I just wanted to know exactly if there was a justification outside of individual interest as to why we need that many parking spaces.
Oh, we don't. And I share, listen, as you know, these applications are trying to serve competing interests at all times. Uh,
Yeah.
Everybody has their own views. So, again, it's certainly something I agree with you. I think it could be put to better use. And I think in general, I believe the policy of parking is outdated at this point. The younger people are in no rush to get cars and drive the way somebody of my age might have been. So I do respect that, and we thank you for putting it in writing when the time comes.
Yeah, but is there an opportunity here to? So my problem, I guess, then becomes because you move forward with the ULURP process. Is there time for a redesign opportunity that can include either commercial space or more residential space on this site? Should you remove, let's say, half the parking spaces?
Yeah, I mean, there certainly can be. I mean, the approval that's being granted is only an approval for the zoning change. It's not a plan-specific approval, so that discussion can be ongoing. And I think the ownership would probably share your interest and desires. Like I said, there is a discussion with the community, and that's just something I would want to, remain cognizant of. But we're happy to maintain and continue. I'll be in touch with you, John Douglas and Ina, your team, and we'd be happy to continue the conversation.
Okay, and I apologize. The council member for this district is
Kalman Yeager.
okay.
Now, you
Sounds
don't,
good.
it's a lot to keep track of. I mean, I have to look on Zola.
I know, and it's and some of them is just they're overlap. That's my fault that I should know that.
Don't apologize.
And eh, so another thing is, because there's more parking than there is housing, um, I assume there's some cost savings there. So if we could just have like a cost benefit analysis, Eric, that could give me an opportunity to justify this to the council member on the community board, as to because right now we're getting more parking spaces than we want. The affordability is at the bare minimum at MIH. We're picking MIH option 2 instead of 1, which is deeper affordability. And I know every single community has a different wants and requests, but we really have to push these communities in an effort to again get ourselves out of this housing crisis. So just wanted to know, does adding more parking make the project more affordable, or does adding more apartments make it more ideal? Like I just want to know which one allows us to expand the amount of affordability or the number of units that we have
Let me go
that are
through
affordable.
with ownership and go through some of the numbers, and we'll get back to you. I can't answer that. I don't know.
Okay. Can you just talk about pedestrian safety on this intersection, given that there will be a childcare center? I just want to make sure that we have a clear and intentional and deliberate
That was discussed.
process. Yeah,
That
go
was
ahead.
discussed and at length. That was discussed. So you're right on point. The community raised that. If anybody who's controlling the screen, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. All IT, but I'm sure you're joking around. But if you could pull the screen back up and show one of the plans, you can go maybe to the first floor plan, which is on page. Go to plane 19. It says 19 in the lower right corner.
Mhm.
So, Mr. Borough President, what you're looking at here is Lake Street, and what you're looking at in the with the green and the colorful nature to it, right before the car is the daycare. That is on Lake Street. You can see that people are entering it on the far left of the building. That is as deep into Lake Street as we can get. Lake Street is a very quiet side street. It does not get a tremendous volume of through traffic. It's a very quiet street. So the concept was that the community proffered, which just keyed into, was to put it over there. The only people coming in into and out of the garage are residents. And as you said, we would hope it would not be used that much. And that would be the idea for the safety, how to address the safety of any family, young children who are coming in with their moms or dads.
Okay. Okay, I'm glad it's on Lake Street. So thank you for that. The marketing campaign, who are you working with to make sure that we're promoting these apartments for CD11 residents? You want to make sure that the community board residents have an
Sure.
opportunity.
Anna is on the line with us of City 5 Consulting, which is a Brooklyn-based consulting organization. They will be doing the administering of it. They're locally based. They have quite a lot of experience doing this. She could speak to what their efforts will be. But they will be working with the community board. They'll be working with the councilman's office to do the outreach. The requisite outreach is required by HPD, and they'll be handling all of that.
I saw the work that you did with the sustainable features. Like a fully electrified building would be great, not necessary, but I do appreciate the presentation. Eric, if you could keep that going on all your projects, it'd be ideal. It's a question that I'd rather not have to present. It's just like do the best you can to make sure that these buildings are green.
I want to bring you green buildings, and I want to bring you with the deepest affordability that I can possibly bring you all the time.
All right, so thank you, Eric. I appreciate it. So I feel like we got this. We got a good handle on this in our office, and we'll be communicating very quickly about what we wanted to see here. We're gonna call on testimony from speakers now, in the chat and on the phone. So we remind viewers wishing to testify to message all attendees in the WebEx chat and state intent to speak on the application. We will now call speakers in order of chat request and then take testimony from those joining by phone. Please
Okay.
note that the comments are limited to 2
Long,
minutes.
right?
Once all speakers have been called, you can ask the staff to, we'll ask the staff to close the items. That's more direction to me. All right, so who is handling that? Is it you, John, or Ina?
Good evening, Borough President. We have not received any requests to speak on this particular application, but we're happy to take any in the next couple of minutes that may arise.
Okay. So let's wait like 5 more seconds. Just anybody on chat, please write in the chat that you would like to speak, and we'll be more than happy to allow you an opportunity. Okay. Remember, you can still submit testimony to us at Ask BP. Yes, right? No, Ask Reynoso. There you go. I apologize for that. Ask Reynoso at brooklynbp.nyc.gov. Ask Reynoso at brooklynbp.nyc.gov. Thank you very much. And I now will call on the staff to close this item. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Borough President.
All right.
Calendar item number 1 is closed. Calendar item number 2, 9th Street rezoning 210348, ZMQ 210349, ZRQ 210350, ZSK.
This is an application by the Angelina Gatto Trust pursuant to Section 197C and 201 of the New York City Charter, affecting 16 lots on the north side of 9th Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenues in Brooklyn Community District 6. The applicant seeks a zoning map amendment to change the project area from M2-1 to M1-4 R7A, a zoning text amendment to establish a coterminous MIH area, and a special permit to waive the required off-street residential parking. These actions would enable a 9-story mixed-use building with 8,000 square feet of ground floor commercial space and 48 units, of which approximately 13 would be affordable pursuant to MIH Option 1. Community Board 6 approved this application with conditions on June 8th. Would the applicant representative please state your name for the record and present this application?
Good evening, Borough President. This is Paul Prue here on behalf of the Angelina Gatto Trust. Thank you for that excellent introduction.
Thank you.
And I'm joined by Richard Gatto, who is the trustee of the trust. And we're here together to present this to you and the public. And so this is an interesting site. You've had an opportunity to walk this with us, and we very much appreciate your attention to the unique factors that that are involved in this, and we will not waste too much of your time with redundant explanations. But if the person controlling the slides could slowly go through the first 10 slides, I'll turn it over to Richie Gatto to introduce himself, the site, and his history in the block. A little slower than that. If you could maybe give each slide maybe 20 seconds, that would be great. Richie, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. Really quick, because I guess we're running late. The first slide that you've seen was a tall fence, and behind that fence, there was residential housing before the 70s. We tore everything down in the 70s, and we used it for some parking and storage. And change is going to happen. It's been too long. It's been way too long that this hasn't been utilized to its full potential. But things have changed over the years. The technology has changed. Everything has changed. The building technology, the neighborhood has changed. And again, I agree with the borough president. Parking is getting to be just overwhelming, and it doesn't suit the community in this particular area. Other areas maybe so, but not this particular. We worked very, very long to try and suit everybody's concerns with this project. And I think we came up with a very viable solution that meets maybe not 100% of everybody, but very, very close. And fortunately, change is here, and something's going to be built. What? I don't know. Hopefully, this beautiful building that you see in the last slide, and the particulars of what I'm trying to propose, I think I'm going to let Paul. Can you handle that?
Yes, thank you, Richie.
Thank you so much.
So, look, I think that what we're communicating is that this is somewhat controversial at some levels in the community, and I think that people have been used to seeing this vacant lot in this location for a long time, and so as a trustee with the trust, it's now time to make an action on this site and to do something with it. And the first building that you saw at the beginning of the presentation is the building that we would like to build, and we'll come back to that in a moment. But if you'll go to slide 11, please. Slide 11 will begin to go through the actions that are necessary to build the building that we showed you. And so if you jump ahead 2 slides, please. The first action is a zoning change. We're proposing, next slide, to change an area of Gowanus from M21 to M14 R7A. And that zoning designation that we've proposed would allow a light manufacturing ground floor and lower levels, as well as residential above. And that would be applicable to this area. If you'll fast forward 2 more or 1 more slide, go to the next slide. This is applicable to an area that is already residential. You see on this land use map, and if you know the site, this is a residential block. We have one commercial building on this in this whole rezoning area. Everything else is already residential. So we're proposing to, next slide, please, make all of those buildings that are long held by people who have raised families in them and who have lived their lives in them, some of them second generation, and they have been non-conforming this whole time. That means they're grandfathered and that they can make some minor changes, but they can't increase the square footage of their grandfathered residential building. They can't do many improvements. It's hard to get financing. Generally speaking, it's not a positive thing to be located in a manufacturing zone as a residential use. So what we're proposing would not only give us the opportunity to develop our site, but it would also legalize and make all of these sites conforming, including the warehouse garage, as you can see from the third to last column on the right. So let's discuss the history. If you could fast forward to the 20th slide. This is a residential. How did it, why isn't it zoned for residential already? This is just below the Gowanus rezoning area, the 82 block area that was rezoned recently. And it was not included in that rezoning. And so that's why we're here today, because we've had to file our own application and take the last 4 years to to bring this through the process. So why wasn't it zoned years ago residential? Well, in 1961, the entire city got rezoned. If you go back one more slide, please. If you go back to slide 20, great. In 1961, the entire city was rezoned. And if you'll go to slide 20, you'll see the correction to that massive rezoning in 1973, where the residential district in Park Slope was expanded slightly to 3rd Avenue. Again, next slide, please. That rezoning, however, did not include, there you go. That rezoning did not include our site, nor any of the other sites that are west of 3rd Avenue. And so notwithstanding the fact that the 73 rezoning corrected the broad brush rezoning of 1961, it missed us then too. So we were missed with the 82 block rezoning, and we were missed in 73. So again, we're proposing to change that. So one of the questions that has come up, and if you'll go to the next slide, is are we in the IBZ area? The industrial business zone is not a zoning district. It's not a zoning designation. It's a business designation. There are certain benefits and city policies that are oriented towards supporting industrial businesses within an IBZ. And generally speaking, I think you would agree, Borough President, that the IBZ is sacrosanct and it should be protected and encouraged and nurtured. We are not in that IBZ. Yes, we are zoned manufacturing, but we are not located within the IBZ. If you'll go to the next slide, you'll see that there are little jagged teeth along 3rd Avenue. And if you'll forward again to the next slide, that include our area, our rezoning area. This industrial business zone has been the subject of a lot of discussion in connection with the 82 block rezoning. Next slide, please. And the community and Borough President at the time, the council member, and many other stakeholders got together to decide how the IBZ should be positioned, how its future should be dealt with, how industrial businesses within the IBZ should be encouraged, and what sort of land use policies might affect that public policy. And they published this report, the Industrial Business Zone Vision Plan, next slide please, which dealt with the IBZ near our location in 3 ways. It created a land use framework that identified certain large waterfront blocks north of our site. It included our site and others along 3rd Avenue in the orange area that you see on the right. And then where there's fairly intensive industrial uses, those were identified in a 4th area. You'll go to the next slide. Each of those areas were subject to certain specific recommendations. The areas in the industrial business zone to the west of us were intended to be supported and possibly upzoned in the future. And the community board's recommendation issued recently was included a reminder to the city that upzoning of the industrial business zone uses should occur, and reminding them that it was part of the framework in the industrial business zone vision plan. Next slide, please. Another aspect of the vision plan was to identify this area along 3rd Avenue where our site is located. If you see 9th Street there, we're just above in the orange area on 9th Street, where certain mixed uses might be more appropriate. Again, this is the residential area. This whole area is residential for the most part, or a mix of uses, but it's not the same industrial business zone manufacturing uses that that were the principal part of the vision plan study. But the vision plan recommended that in this area, that where appropriate, there might be changes in the zoning to facilitate mixed uses and residential uses. And along 9th Street, if you look at the last few lines of this report, it suggested that additional density may be appropriate on 9th Street. So consistent with that policy, we have filed this application. Next slide, please. So why M14R7A? Why does that make sense here? Next slide. The location of our site in between 2 mass transit nodes, the train at 4th Avenue and 9th Street and the Smith Street stop to our west, we're equidistant between the two of them. 9th Street is a bus route, 9th Street is a bike route, and 9th Street is a cross-canal corridor. It's an ideal location for density. And the fact that it has been undeveloped due to these historic accidents that we've mentioned at the beginning, is an anomaly. And we're suggesting that maybe now is the time to fix that anomaly and to take advantage of its naturally beneficial location for additional density to help house New Yorkers. Next slide, please. But why R7A? Well, there's 2 precedents to mention. One is the other cross-canal corridor that was included in the 82 block rezoning on Union Street. There, R7A was also mapped along portions of the blocks on Union Street that were very similar to our own. So we think that's a good marker for us. The other precedent, next slide, please, was on 3rd Avenue, where a developer recently proposed a change to C44A. C44A is exactly the same as M14R7A, which is what we're proposing, with only 1 or 2 minor differences. And this area is also in the portion of the manufacturing district where the industrial business zone vision plan suggested that certain upzonings may be appropriate. So consistent with that plan, the community board approved and the city council approved this upzoning to C44A. Now let's look at the differences between the two. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. M14 allows a broad mix of commercial and light industrial uses. C44A does not. The M14 designation that we've chose to pair with the R7A would allow the broadest mix of manufacturing uses, including food sector businesses, which is what we have planned here. Richie did not mention his long history in meat markets in Brooklyn. He was a butcher at the Key Foods on 4th or 5th Avenue at Baltic and in other locations nearby over the course of the last 40 years. Next slide, please. If you can see this small print here, it's just identifying the different uses that are allowed in C44A, again, in the rezoning area that was already approved in November of last year. Next slide, please. And the much broader set of mixes that are allowed in, or use groups that are allowed in the M14 designated area that we're proposing. That would be use groups 1 through 14, 16, and 17. So we're suggesting that there's a broader mix of potential job producing businesses that might use our space if this rezoning is approved. Next slide, please. I think that's a duplicate. Next slide, please. Again, next slide. This is the site, our site with the, so what are the actions? We have gone over the rezoning. If you could flip 2 slides. The other one is the special permit parking waiver. Like you, Borough President, we are enthusiastic proponents for change in the parking regulations that are applicable to all housing in the city of New York. And we think that this special permit parking waiver that we've proposed here speaks to that. Next slide, please. We are proposing an 8,000 square foot ground floor commercial or light manufacturing space in the base of our building. And subject to some conversation, there's also a 8,000 square foot cellar that we could use for active uses. And if we were to put parking in this location, next slide, please, the sort of drive aisle that would be necessary in order to maintain that and to get parking to the basement or up above would limit the ground floor active space to 3,500 square feet. We think that's an awful use of ground floor space. However, in public conversation, certain neighbors have been suggesting that parking might be appropriate. So we have looked at that. Next slide, please. But we think it's a bad idea. Next slide, please. The last action is a text amendment for MIH and for MX because it's a pairing of M14 and R7A. There's a text amendment that's really just paperwork that identifies the MX district. The MIH designation, next slide, please, we're proposing would be applicable to the entire rezoning area, not just our site. And it would make mandatory that any development that includes residential housing beyond a certain level, I think 12 units is the cap, would include mandatory inclusionary housing. And we have suggested option 1 in our application. We have heard back from Community Board 6 that option 3 might be preferable, and so we're looking closely at that. Option 1 would, of course, allow 30% of our units, or would require 30% of our units to be affordable at a 60% AMI. And the option 3 would be slightly less percentage, but a lower AMI. And so we're fairly agnostic on that point. Next slide, please. So what will these actions allow us to build? That's the building that we've shown previously. If you show that again, please, next slide. It's a 95-foot, 9-story building that would include a base with a 15-foot ceiling height. We have committed in conversations that we've been having over the course of the last year and with your office, Borough President, to doing the kind of infrastructural work for the ground floor space that would facilitate an easy tenancy by a manufacturing use. That is to say that we're going to provide the ground floor space with the electricity, with the ventilation, with the load-bearing capacity, with all of the things that are necessary to facilitate a light manufacturing use there. Next slide, please. But I think most importantly, it would activate the street here. The waiver of parking would open up this space, which is now just a blank fence, and ideally would include uses that are appreciated, used, and loved by the community, as the rendering shows. So that's our presentation. I'm sorry it's a little bit long, but we did want to be thorough, and there's a couple other slides here. If you'd like to discuss the community board recommendations, we'd be happy to. As you know, they approved the plan 31-6 in favor, and we're very appreciative for that and eager to discuss what they've suggested if you'd like to. So that's
Paul, go straight into it, Paul. Can you just go through the community board recommendations and what you think of them and what you're looking to do to respond to the concerns of the community board?
Yeah, certainly. I'd be happy to. The first one was, as I mentioned before, describing that recommending that the city rezone the IBZ. And what that means is that they would like to see the manufacturing districts to the west of us, where the IBZ is located, upzone to allow greater density. Right now, the 2 FAR that's allowed there, basically, no one's going to build more than a story, because it doesn't make sense to finance an elevator and build a second story for a manufacturing building at any sort of scale. But if we rezone to something like, I forget what, but there are manufacturing zones with much higher FAR levels, and I think that's the idea here. But that was not something that was discussed in the 82 block rezoning, and the community would like to see that revisited and are encouraging the city to do that. The other recommendation was the more deeply affordable housing. Again, the board reiterates that option 2 and 4 are not acceptable. We've proposed option 1. I think they would like to see option 3. And I've discussed the differences in affordability. We're fairly agnostic on that point. They also suggested that the affordable housing that we're going to build here prioritize existing 9th Street residents. And we're very happy to do that. Right now, it is legal to include a community preference, but I'm sure you know that's subject to some judicial review at very high levels. And there's some question about whether it's even a good policy, but we have no qualms with it. And if it's legal, we'll gladly include the 50% community preference. As we've discussed with your office, there are currently 40 people living within the rezoning area. And there is one building that exceeds 6 units. That building has 8 units in it, so it's therefore subject to rent stabilization. There's only one rent stabilized tenant in that building. So that means that while there would be displacement of potentially 40 people if every single lot that we're proposing to rezone were developed, there would only be one rent stabilized unit that would be lost, and we'd create several others, ideally for with a community preference for community members. So this would be a net gain. The fourth is to participate in the construction oversight task force and to engage in certain coordination activities, and we're very happy to do that. And the last, I think, is a little bit of the most tricky issue. If you notice on our slide, we have one of the most preeminent green building architects working with us, Tony Daniels, who designed the Stillwell Avenue subway stop with all the solar panels. He has designed us a green building, and certainly there will be rainwater compensation and a green roof. But the issue here on this block, which I'm sure you'll hear about, is that there are serious flood problems here. And I think there's a real fear in the community about additional density creating a problem for, with the sewers where it's already taxed. And we're certainly conscious of that and aware of that, and we'll do everything we can to incorporate mitigation measures within our own building. But the reality is, I think that it takes a development like this to trigger improvements to the sewer system, which are long overdue in this location. So we'll work with DEP to make that happen in connection with construction here and incorporate green building technologies to our best abilities.
Okay, Paul. You had mentioned Third Avenue and some of the similarities that the development that happened in that street with the density that you're looking to propose on this one. I just want to say it's just Third Avenue is a wide street compared to the narrow street that is here. So while there's some, I guess, symptoms that can make it feel like they're very similar projects. This is a much narrower street than the Third Avenue, the districts of the streets that abut Third Avenue. So I want to be careful with granting like identical scenarios there. Just being careful.
Certainly, I would add though that east of us, 9th Street all the way up to the park is a wide street, and it's a much different character than right in front of our building. So it narrows down as you get to the canal crossing. But yeah, that's a valid point for sure.
And the huge concerns that people have over residential that are budding manufacturing are concerns there. Let me just see. Okay.
Our thought is that without a residential component at this location, even the 8,000 square feet that we're proposing, is difficult to finance. And so we really think the mixed use designation is appropriate here relative to the community's concerns about manufacturing uses.
Yeah. All right. So I wanna allow for the public to speak. This is a very, very special and unique application. And want to hear from the general public. And I'm looking forward to writing this one up, believe it or not. But it is complex to say the least. So I want to allow for members of the community to say a few words. So I'm gonna call the we're gonna call on folks, and then I might speak after that, Paul. Um, I'm very familiar with the site. I'm very familiar with everything. We talked to the council member. I was physically there in front of the site, so I'm very well acquainted with like what's happening there. But would love for to hear from the community. So if the staff can call on the speakers.
Okay, we have several people signed up. So first we'll call those who indicated intent to speak in the chat, and then we'll check if there's anybody on the phones. Our first speaker is Paul Basile.
Thank you, Ener. Borough President Reynoso, I respect your work at the City Council during the previous rezoning in Gowanus, and I respectfully ask that these comments be put by behalf. The IBZ is not isolated because of a line on a map. What happens around it affects it both positively and negatively. The area of IBZ was left as a transition buffer to be looked at by the city planning to better understand the needs of our manufacturing and industrial communities. The continued rezoning of manufacturing area after one of the largest rezonings and largest loss of manufacturing area without comprehensive studies or better understanding of the impacts to small businesses in our area is a city disconnect with our community as well as small businesses. Although our mayor so timely announced a new zoning vision for our city, it fails to address this application at this time. Therefore, if it's right for our community, it should be looked at on a broader scale, along with other pending zoning issues that were promised for the IBZ and manufacturing area. The current chipping away approach hastens displacement of businesses, many small businesses already occurring in the area. We're currently seeing much greater demand for space in our area because so many Gowanus businesses are being displaced from the area. I personally have signed 2 leases with local businesses from the area looking to stay in Gowanus to manufacture and produce. There's an artist from Douglas catering to a 2,500 square foot space from an 1,800 space that is slated to be developed for residential development. Gowanus Alliance is working with manufacturing property owners. They're struggling to keep rent while covering repairs and real estate. A distributor that can no longer operate in its current location because of increased construction activity. We believe several calls a week. I receive several calls a week. It is our concern that applications such as this one on 9th Street could impact businesses seeking to remain in a stable manufacturing area. I suspect this will continue as rezoned property owners start to demolish industrial spaces. So while the IBZ, our organization, and my fellow property owners are receiving higher than usual calls about space availability, available manufacturing space remains scarce. Shouldn't that be a consideration when planning how Gowanus grows and can retain its businesses and jobs? The need in this area of Gowanus is for growth to alleviate both the pressures of limited availability and push back on the financial equation that benefits a conversion to residential rather than investment in jobs. A promise in theory is still a promise. The hundreds of businesses on us home are here because of the developers give to justify their residential applications. The balance is fragile. The city has an obligation to be responsible in this planning. The loss of local small businesses will continue unless we as a community stand up for our small businesses. Give Gowanus a chance to realize the impacts of the recent large rezoning as thousands of new apartments come into our area, all coming while we still have not prepared our infrastructure, transportation, schools, or a plan for small businesses to remain productive and grow here if they want. Homes are not just for people. Our businesses that call Gowanus call these homes also. Deserve a chance to function without conflicts with new residents, new traffic, and old infrastructure. Please consider the businesses you call your neighbors. More apartments mean more last mile warehouses. Shop, live, work, play local depends on affording everyone a chance to stay here. Quality of life for hundreds of businesses versus a few more somewhat affordable apartments is the balance you're reviewing here. The attorney for the applicant admitted that our previous council person would not entertain this application. That was because promises were made to our community in exchange for supporting the largest loss of manufacturing area in recent history. These promises must be continued by new leadership in our Borough President's office and our City Council. Nothing has changed since promises were made, so we should be. of more change until the community and our manufacturers are giving a steady footing for their future. We're asking this application be tabled until our leaders follow through on the promise to help all community stakeholders find a future of growth and sustainability. Small businesses need your support, not only for zoning issues with the real impacts of gentrification, presses for speculation, practices and incentives to allow the industrial sector find incentives from the city that are not responding to its challenges. Real estate taxes continue to increase on manufacturing properties, while our city continues the largest tax giveaway for residential development. The ICAP is not enough to incentivize the investments to our members' factories and job creation. This application, as presented, does not add significant affordability to our community.
Paul, we need to, Paul, can you go ahead, Paul, keep it up,
Thank
but
you.
yeah, it's
No.
2 minutes and I want to give you as much
Yes.
time as possible.
The end here, the Borough President, you have a vision and please be balanced here. Thank you.
Yeah. And then just Paul, just some background, and I hear you 100%. And you know my background, and especially when it comes to manufacturing work. I think we want to see if there's an opportunity here, and we haven't made a decision on what we want to do here, but just see how practical we could be. And I agree with you. I'm very uncomfortable with having like residential development abutting manufacturing. But this block is all types of whack. And we need to figure something out. It's just non-conforming across the board. It's commercial, it's residential, it's manufacturing, and it's just a planning well, it depends. A planning nightmare or planning dream, depending on where you stand on that. But I appreciate your testimony, Paul. None of it is lost on me. And I want to thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Borough President.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your leadership and your vision.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ben Meskin.
Hello. Am I heard? Yes. I've lived in this immediate neighborhood near this site for over 30 years. 90s, I was active in the neighborhood association in the area. I care about the slope. I was the president of that group from late 90s to the early 2000s. I was in Community Board 6 for 2 years from 1994. I'd like to point out that this block is perhaps the most congested, overwhelmed place, Community Board 6 and anywhere around here. The only thing that might equal it is 39th Street and Sunset Park. The idea of rezoning what is approximately 2/3 of the north side of the street, have 9-story buildings, is ludicrous. Anywhere else, it would still be pretty hard to conceive of. But of all the places to put it, this is the worst. You said, Mr. Borough President, that this block is out of whack. Block is zone manufacturing with grandfathered residential uses. That's true of most of this neighborhood between 2nd and 3rd Avenue. Not all blocks. Some of the blocks, the residential premises are all gone. Some, there's one residential building right on the corner of 3rd Avenue, and everything else is gone. That is a sort of development here. I think this is a horrible place to put it. I'm glad you say you've been there. There may be things to do on that block. It's not been developed, perhaps. Perhaps the owners have just been waiting for a good day to get as much as they could with it. The presentation did not talk about the owners trying to find buyers who wanted to do manufacturing use or signing leases with manufacturing tenants. Just sat there for a long time, and today looks like a good day. Now, I'll point something else out. On the residential blocks east of 3rd Avenue, you cannot build a residential premises there now more than 5 stories. This was an enormous battle in the early 2000s. So it would be interesting to see to go up if this becomes a precedent that not only in an area that's not even zone manufacturing, you can have 9-story residential buildings. Well, then why can't you do it on every zone block in the special rezoned areas in Park Slope and Community Board 6 and in Community Board 7? I mean, if you can do it here, you can do it there. There's a horrible, horrible precedent. It would be anything that's put there is going to create tension on that block. But I want to say the reason that that block is on manufacturing and the reason that this area basically south of 6th Street was not rezoned is because of all of that manufacturing belt around the Gowanus Canal. This area, this sort of southeast Gowanus, southeast zone of the Gowanus still has a great deal of manufacturing and commercial uses that are appropriate in this zoning. It's not some accident. Oh, this block just got left out. It's so unfortunate. No. It was zoned that way for, it has stayed that way for a reason. If the Gatto family had been able to keep up the residential buildings there, they would still be there. The only thing I would say is that the community board, this was voted down in the committee quite strongly, and then the community board, its own full board, said we approve it with conditions. I want to say I've been watching Community Board 6 since around 1986. I got to this area, but before I got to Park Slope, before I got to this immediate area, is they have a pattern of never saying no to things, but saying yes with conditions, yes with conditions. I think that if that's true, every condition that they put there would have to be met before this was approved. But that never happens. They say, and all that's remembered is, oh, the board approved it. I say no. Need to keep, I'm a resident here, and that there are ongoing tensions between the residents and the businesses here. But I think it should stay the way it's currently zoned. There has to
Ben,
be
thank you.
somewhere.
Thank you, Ben. It's sorry,
wrap
Ben.
up.
I hear you loud and clear. Just it's a 2 minutes. I'm letting people go a little over because I really want to hear them. But there's a lot of folks that want to talk.
I'm almost. I
All right,
accept that this is a manufacturing zone. Have to have it somewhere. So here it is. There isn't much. It's around 3/4 of it just disappeared, and I think it should remain under the current zoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your testimony.
Our next speaker is Shaurya Datta.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Borough President Reynoso, staff and neighbors. Hi there, Borough President Reynoso. Great to see you on for this. Thank you for offering a remote option to safely participate in this community discussion with you this evening. My name is Shaurya Datta. I'm speaking on my own behalf as a constituent and Brooklyn resident of downtown Brooklyn. I'm expressing my support for this rezoning application on 9th Street in Gowanus. I'm a first-generation immigrant and public servant, and I'm lucky to live in modern, rent-stabilized, mixed-income rental housing created as a result of earlier rezonings in downtown Brooklyn. As I witnessed firsthand, and I know you know this too, how Brooklyn's housing scarcity has grown even more severe during this pandemic. I want us to do all we can so that others in Brooklyn can have the same housing stability that I have. I know the 48 total apartments that this rezoning on 9th Street that it envisions will not alone solve Brooklyn's housing scarcity, but every little bit helps. We need that help now, and we do that by being creative with the tools and programs we have available to us now. 13 of these apartments will be permanently affordable. That's meaningful to me, especially as I've seen dozens of friends and peers leave the New York area in the past 2 years alone due to rising housing costs associated with a growing family, particularly in the areas represented by Community Boards 2 and 6, among the most opportunity and transit-rich parts of Brooklyn. I know sometimes there are those who are already fortunate to be homeowners or live in rent-restricted housing. They don't like changes to neighborhoods, but unfortunately that leaves everyone else fighting it out for the very few housing options that remain in Brooklyn. We have an opportunity here to at least try to change that. I've lived in this area or just a few blocks away for more than a dozen years. Seems to me that the blocks contemplated in this zoning could be well located for new homes because they have good subway access to downtown Brooklyn and Manhattan. And from what I've heard, that this project will not introduce any new parking, but will create mixed-use spaces that can host both jobs and homes, I think this is exactly the kind of creative home building we need to encourage, especially around transit stations, to create new options for sustainable family living in Brooklyn. I'm pleased that Community Board 6 already voted in favor to support this rezoning, and I hope that your office will too. Thank you, President Reynoso.
Thank you, Mr. Dada.
Okay, our next speaker is Will Thomas.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Beautiful. Hi, everyone. My name is Will Thomas. I serve as the Executive Director of Open New York. We're an independent grassroots pro-housing organization. We support 153 and 157 9th Street because we feel that allowing more homes in Gowanus will both help to alleviate New York's housing shortage, but also fight displacement across Brooklyn. I believe everyone knows on some level that New York has a terrible housing shortage, but let me add some context to the conversation. Right now, New Yorkers are facing rent increases up to 50, 60, 70% as rent discounts offered during the pandemic expire. Homelessness is at the highest rate since the Great Depression. There are over 14,000 children who sleep in city shelters every night. So the 12 affordable homes this rezoning would provide are desperately needed. But also allowing more market rate homes in Gowanus, which is an objectively wealthy enclave of the city, will also help by proactively preventing displacement in other neighborhoods. The census tract of the rezoning area has a median household income of $99K, which is well above the city average. Gowanus is a desirable neighborhood, and although it would be many families' first choice, if they can't find a place to live here, they're going to move to a more affordable neighborhood. But as displaced demand increases in those less wealthy neighborhoods, the rent's going to increase. It's going to force current tenants to allocate ever larger shares of their income to stay in their homes and knock those who can't pay to the street. So if neighborhoods like Gowanus don't build their fair share of housing, long-term residents of neighborhoods further in Brooklyn like Crown Heights, Flatbush, Brownsville will continue to be displaced. And so approving this application, we feel, is the first step in sparing families in less wealthy neighborhoods the pressure of displacement. In addition, I know that some have opposed the rezoning because they feel like it could potentially set a precedent for a residential rezoning of the Gowanus Industrial Business Zone and threaten jobs. But I think it's important to note that the rezoning doesn't include any of the IBZ. It is on a block that is already mostly residential. It merely abuts the IBZ. Mixed income housing is very appropriate here and should be supported. Allowing the rezoning will displace no businesses, and the solution to getting more space for businesses, in our opinion, is following the recommendation of the community board for an industrial upzoning of the IBZ for more square footage there. But to put it plainly, we live in a city where there aren't enough homes that people want to live here. It has horrifying human consequences. I hope the borough president, I hope you will approve this project, which is clearly the right decision for Brooklyn and for Gowanus as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Appreciate it.
Okay, we have a few more speakers. Our next speaker is Jesse Lang.
Hi, hello, can you hear me? Okay, great. So thank you so much for taking the time to hear what I have to say. I just want to say a few words strongly in support of this project. As Will kind of pointed out in a lot of his great statistics that he outlined, that I won't try to repeat because they were all very specific numbers. We need more housing, and Gowanus is really a good place that we should be considering for it. And that Gowanus can really go a long way towards meeting the housing needs of Brooklyn and New York City as a whole. And this really should just be thought of as one really important part of it. So I think that, for that reason, I would be really happy for you to vote in support of this. I was happy to see that the community board voted in favor of this. And so, I'm happy to have seen that there is already some support. And as you know, I know that some of the opponents to this project say that this housing should go somewhere else, that it's not appropriate for this area. I think we've clearly seen that this is a residential area. So it does seem appropriate to me that this housing would go here. But we should also be looking at housing everywhere else, not just here. So for people that are saying that the housing should be somewhere else, yeah, it should be somewhere else and here. So I would really encourage you to go with a yes and approach and really be favoring as much housing as possible so we can meet the needs of our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dave Bunting.
Hello, everybody. Can you see me? I'll do my best to keep it brief. I have my comments timed and pre-written. I want to start off by saying thank you, Borough President, for hosting this. I'm empathetic to the housing needs. I super am. We all know there's a raging housing shortage everywhere, but I'm pretty sure that's what the original rezone was all about. Okay, I am a business owner on the very block that is in question, on the corner of 9th Street and 2nd Avenue. I run King Killer Studios, which is a large complex of music rehearsal and recording rooms that have been there for 15 years. And in those 15 years, King Killer has become home to thousands of New York City musicians, none of whom have garages or basements in which to practice, let alone their own apartments. I'm here to request that you oppose this variance requested on 9th Street by the Gatto Trust. I contend that the paltry number of affordable housing units proposed, none of which could fit a family, are not justification enough for the approval. The developer has used outdated water table data and ignored a bevy of other environmental and fiscal impacts, despite their contention that they have. My main concern is the precedent that this approval would set. Gowanus just underwent a massive rezoning, and spot rezoning efforts like this only serve to erode the remaining character and purpose of the industrial business zone, and put businesses like mine at risk of being zoned out of existence. CB6's approval came after an 11-4 vote against from their own Landmark and Land Use Committee 2 weeks prior, showing us all how little they care about preserving this necessary industrial neighborhood, or keeping jobs and creative spaces safe from insurmountable amounts of residential development cash, let alone giving the most cursory consideration of the actual impacts it will have on those of us who spend the most time here and have a real stake in the neighborhood. My only option now is to come to you directly and plead for you to stop this project and say a strident and resounding no to further rezoning in the Gowanus Industrial Business Zone. Businesses like mine are a dying breed already. Approving this craven, dishonest, and misrepresentative proposal would constitute tacit approval of the displacement of thousands of musicians and other creatives, the lifeblood of New York City, who have nowhere else to go at this point. Please do the right thing and deny this variance. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dan. Sorry, have we heard from Dan Miller? I think we have.
I don't think so.
We haven't? Okay.
Yep.
Dan Miller,
Hi.
I apologize. You are our next speaker, and you'll be followed by Beth Morrow.
Hi, my name is Dan Miller. I am a former resident of Brooklyn. I had to move just last year because I was priced out of Brooklyn. My girlfriend and I were moving in together, and we were looking for apartments, but we couldn't find anything affordable in a Brooklyn neighborhood that we liked, and we ended up moving to Queens. And that is why I'm testifying in favor of the project in Gowanus. I think that everyone agrees that New York has a housing shortage, and I think the only solution to a shortage is to build more affordable, build more market rate, build more homes so that people like me can make a home in Brooklyn. I lived in Brooklyn for 6 years. I loved it there. I was happy. But if people can't afford to move in with girlfriends, to move out from roommates, if people can't afford to find a new place in Brooklyn, then they won't. And that would be a tragedy. So I'm asking you, on behalf of people like me who would like to live in Brooklyn, but right now can't because of our housing shortage, to say yes to this project. Say yes to building more. Say yes to housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan, and trust me, I don't want you moving to Queens. It's the last thing I want you to be doing. But appreciate your testimony, brother.
Hello, I'm Beth Morrow, and I am noticing that nobody who is testifying in favor of the project appears to live in the neighborhood and be part of the community or be a part of the business world that exists around this site. We have the place that abuts the Gatto land on two sides. And I think it's very important to note that while all of 8th Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenues is opposed to this proposal and this zoning variance, we are not asking that there not be any change or any development on that blighted piece of parking lot that the Gattos own. We are just asking that the improvements be made within the current use and scale parameters. And we all feel affordability is important, but this building creates a very small amount of affordable units and is part of the larger drive towards luxury housing that will drive neighborhood housing prices up. It will also displace existing low and moderate income residents. Some residents are higher income, some are low. There are a lot of people that have lived there a long time. They will be displaced and are very worried and upset about that. I don't understand why Community Board 6, and there's not a lot more discussion about the fact that keeping it commercial and light manufacturing as a full building is important for creating the jobs that are then necessary to be able to afford to live in this area. These are, if the building is a manufacturing building, the jobs it creates will not be baristas and waiters. They will be a variety of jobs that apply and support families all across the income spectrum. In addition, there's been a little bit of reference to the environmental issues. Mr. Pearl's statement that they will do all we can is not enough. Currently, each time it rains, at least one of the buildings is flooded with sewage, and it is a really big problem. And spot rezoning that isn't done with planning for the whole neighborhood is a problem for both the environmental aspects and the impact on the business community and the future of affordable jobs, jobs that make it affordable to live in the neighborhood. So we really hope that you deny this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Beth.
Our next speaker is Michael Wabba. I apologize if I mispronounced your name.
Yes, Michael Waba. I own a building right across the street on 9th Street. It's a very commercial area. I agree with Paul. I'm going to be very short. I agree with Paul and a few guys that talking about keeping it commercial. I'm there for about, I think, 10 years now. Buying another piece next door to me. I'm in the area. I have a few buildings in the area. I'm in the tool rental business. Listen, if you did zone a commercial, I'm sure it would work with it. But if you could keep it commercial, it'd be much better. I have an empty lot there. I have plans to build a new building, build another, I think it's about 10,000 feet, all commercial. We're going to keep it commercial. We're going to comply with our zoning, not go for a rezoning. And I think we'll be successful. the area. I've been in the area for about 40 years now. I know I look a little young, but I've been there for 40 years, and we're excited to still be here and keep it the same as it is. Keep the character of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for your testimony. Appreciate it.
Our next speaker is CJ, followed by Alex Scherenbeck.
Can everyone hear me okay? My name's not CJ, my name's Catherine. I didn't know how to update it on WebEx, but I can assure, first of all, that I live in the neighborhood. I live a 10-minute walk from the site. I grew up my whole life in Brooklyn, over 30 years, in CB6 actually, the entire time, the F train, my entire life. And I am in support of this project. No one's paying me. I truly do believe it. I'll start by saying I understand that change is hard. I grew up here. I think my views on housing development changed a lot over the years. I think I echo a lot of the people who voted yes on the project, that there's a huge housing shortage in New York. There's just no way around it. And we just need to build more housing. And I think this project, no project is perfect. No project will make everyone happy. But it is a really great example of mixed use development. And we just really need to start building more. And I'm a homeowner in the area. I represent that kind of perspective of, even as a homeowner, even as someone who spent my whole life here, I see a lot of value in this project and I fully support it. And I hope that you also vote yes. Oh, and also I worked in Gowanus as a bike mechanic for a few years, and I still know a friend who owns a business there. This is good for businesses, provides more foot traffic, and I can see the value that it brings to both businesses, future residents, current residents, and really just advocate for this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Borough President, my name is Alex Scherenbeck. I am the chair of the Community Board 6 Land Use Committee, but I'm here just in my personal capacity to say a word about this application. The board did vote overwhelmingly to approve it with conditions. I want to reiterate, Mr. Borough President, how much we mean that first condition about our earnest commitment to work with you and the council members to strengthen the IBZ, to do a rezoning that could do right by businesses that are struggling and property holders that are very committed to the industrial character and the live-work nature of our neighborhood, to make that a possibility for the next century. We're stuck with really outdated zoning that is not working for many of the businesses, and we're here and ready to do that, and eager to do that now that the Gowanus neighborhood rezoning plan is not in the rear view mirror, but the formal land use process has concluded. The reason why this is a worthy proposal, I would submit, is, of course, the housing crisis. And I want to note in particular the level of affordability this project has the potential to add. 40% AMI could mean a 2-bedroom at $1,200 a month. If you look around our neighborhood, you will struggle to find anything even remotely that affordable. And as someone who grew up here on 11th Street, not far from this proposal, I have seen this neighborhood go from a place where people like my parents, a nurse and a union guy, could buy a house to one where that is a joke. And we need to be a place where working people can live again. And so that's the number one reason to support this. And we think you can do that in conjunction with strengthening the industrial business zone. And we also think that the parking waiver is particularly appropriate here, given the transit access on 9th Street. And I'll note many of the conflicts that people point out when they think about industrial next to residential arise from more residential traffic congestion. And so alleviating the parking requirement here actually goes a long way to making the industrial and residential uses compatible together. Fewer cars on the road, a curb cut that could instead be a loading zone, et cetera. So much of our thinking is in that resolution, the community board's thinking, but my own thinking, I just wanted to elaborate here. So thank you, Mr. Borough President.
Thank you, Alec.
We have one more speaker, and that's Jesse Sullivan.
Okay, Jesse.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessie Solomon. I'm the Executive Director of Southwest Brooklyn Industrial Development Corporation, or SBIDC. Really want to echo a lot of the comments already made here tonight, but just as a way of introduction, we're a local economic development corporation whose mission is to advocate and serve industrial manufacturing businesses in Southwest Brooklyn in the industrial business zone and beyond. And we have some concerns about this particular proposal. First and foremost, I want to reiterate that we're seeing massive demand for industrial and manufacturing space. And I agree with some of the comments that this site could support a mix of commercial and industrial on the site instead of including residential and still be a financially feasible project. And we would prefer to see that kind of project happen. SBIDC is not opposed to housing outside of the industrial business zone, which this is, but we would really like to see deeper levels of affordability, echoing the comments mentioned by the community board. And we also know how challenging it is to accommodate a mix of manufacturing and residential in one site. In order to accommodate that type of mix, you would really need to see enforcement mechanisms in place and a good faith effort from the developer. So that could include a community benefits agreement or other legal documents to ensure affordable manufacturing space throughout the site, either on the ground floor or elsewhere on the property or on the block. Unfortunately, that does not seem feasible on this site, so we would need some real support from our elected officials to make sure that that can happen on that site. And in an absence of securing real industrial manufacturing space on the property, we would urge the borough president to really carefully consider whether or not to support this particular project and we also want to echo our support for the comments that the community board has made as well and that Alec just shared in terms of the residential component. We're happy to continue conversations about how we can advance more manufacturing and industrial space throughout the neighborhood and current M-zoned land, and would be happy to take follow-up questions or conversation. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Okay, that's all for speakers who have signed up. I could do one last call for anyone else who would like to testify. And we can also take any comments by phone.
So thank you so much for everyone. This has been the most active. Hello?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I just joined, but are we still allowed to testify on this land use application?
Is this Kana Irving?
Yes. Hello, Borough
Is it
President.
related to the 9th Street rezoning?
Yes.
Yes, you can go ahead and you have 2 minutes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're
Thank you for your time. My name is Anna Irvin. I'm a resident of Park Slope. I've lived here for 5 years. I just wanted to come in and voice my support for this project. When I first moved to Park Slope, I made $35,000. I had a very hard time making ends meet, and it was impossible for me to find a rent stabilized apartment, of course, because the city just doesn't produce enough housing or, income restricted housing. I've seen rents go up for many of my friends. My rent went up. I'm really concerned that we're not producing enough rental units for people to live in. I know that when there's increased demand for housing, we see rents skyrocket. In my own personal experience, I've lived in really bad rental housing in a very nice neighborhood in Park Slope where the, apartments and also co-ops are very, very expensive because people want to live there. And when you have a rental building, the landlord has no incentive to make any changes or any renovations to that apartment because they know it's in such a desirable area to live. And they don't make those changes. And if you don't own your own house in this area in Park Slope or Gowanus, it's kind of a wreck. And I really, really want to encourage you, Borough President, to look favorably on this application. I saw the proposal when I was testifying, or when I voiced my opinion at the Community Board 6 meeting. I think it looks great. The MIH is really, really affordable, and I would have been able to move into one of those apartments. I'm really happy that the Community Board voted yes. I was disappointed to hear some people make comments that, oh, it's only 12 people. It's not going to solve our housing crisis. But for people who are really, have trouble making ends meet, that rent would make it or break it. And we need to be more welcoming of more neighbors and house our New Yorkers. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Kana. Anyone else that might be out in the ether that would
We
want
have
to?
someone named Amanda R. who has their
Yes,
hand
hello.
raised.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Amanda. Go ahead.
Okay,
You have
thank
two
you.
2 minutes. And this is related to 9th Street.
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead, Amanda.
Yes, thanks so much for your time and attention to this. I am a resident of Park Slope and I have an office space in Gowanus. And despite being right on top of the all of the rezoning going on, I find myself catching up to understand what the issues are. And I would really appreciate some consideration for longtime residents who are very concerned about the climate crisis and the city's priorities. And we're facing an existential crisis. In my opinion, housing is very important, but the city not paying attention to the infrastructure that exists already for taking care of the sewage and waste and how our city functions in terms of what we're contributing. In my opinion, we need to turn down this project and put our attention on improving the already existing infrastructure of low-income housing and the quality of life for people. It doesn't mean that we cannot make that denser and a more productive space. I appreciate everyone's time, but I feel like, in New York City being such a leader internationally, it would be extremely beneficial and life-saving for many people if we could lead on climate and show our priorities correctly in this matter. Thank you.
We have one more speaker, Catherine Briggs. Though it looks like we also have some others with their hands up. So anyone who wishes to speak, you can raise your hand and we will acknowledge that. Catherine, please go ahead with your testimony. Okay, anyone who cannot give verbal testimony is welcome to submit their testimony online. Our final speaker is Shelby. Please unmute yourself.
Shelby? I guess the folks that are last here are having some trouble. Okay.
Shelby, you are unmuted.
Shelby, can you say something? No? All right. Well, Ina, is there anybody else?
Not in the chat. Please let me know if there's anyone waiting to speak on the phone.
Anyone on the phone? No, we can't hear you, Shelby. We cannot. Anybody that can't be heard? Oh, I'm hearing someone in the background.
Catherine, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Catherine.
Oh, thank you so much. Sorry, I had to come back in order to get connected. I apologize. I was late to the meeting tonight because I was playing coaches and parents versus kids at John Jay athletic volleyball tonight. So it was all for a good reason. I did submit my testimony, but I did want to make sure that as a longtime resident adjacent to the site, that I was heard with everybody today. I represent the interests of the other 10 residential property owners that are adjacent to the proposed site. We are on 8th Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenues, and we all uniformly strongly oppose the current plan, not because we don't want change, but because we want to be involved in this process, Borough President. We have been ignored for a long time, We know that we need change. We know that there's going to be more development in our area, but we deserve to be involved in this process. So we are just asking for you to listen to our needs, involve us in this process. We believe that there's a better option than what's being currently presented. We've worked for a long time with our commercial and industrial neighbors, and we work very well with them. We understand their needs and they understand ours, and we believe firmly that there's a better way than through the current project. So we really look forward to continuing this dialogue and ask for that opportunity. That's all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. I think Shelby would be the only one that we were missing because of technical difficulties. And we apologize, Shelby. Please ask Reynoso at brooklynbp.nyc.gov. If you submit your testimony there, we'll be sure to read it and consider it. Is there anyone else that could possibly want or cannot get in contact with us? No? Okay. Well, this is the most expansive hearing that we've had to date. And I wasn't lying when I said it was out of whack, to say the least. I guess what I want to say is, one, please pay attention to my testimony when we put this together. I'm arguably the strongest advocate for manufacturing in the previous city council that existed for 8 years, and have been looking to rezone the North Brooklyn IBZ when I was a representative of Williamsburg, the North Brooklyn IBZ, to do exactly that. We're talking 2-3 FAR and only introducing commercial to those areas should we see an increase in manufacturing, protecting M3 zones so that they're untouched, expanding M2 and M1 zone. So again, to anybody that is in and around this area that is supporting the manufacturing, you probably have somebody that no one's going to consider that more than I am, while also being what I would consider somebody that cares deeply about building as much housing as possible, not just affordable, but all housing is extremely valuable in the city. We have tens of thousands of people living in shelters, and there is a crisis. The city hasn't built enough housing over the last decades, and it's something that we want to pay attention to, because it's going to continue to make the city more and more unaffordable. So there is conflicting interests here that we need to help solve for, and I'm looking into doing just that. So please be on the lookout for my testimony, and really do appreciate everybody that took the time to speak here, and appreciate you all. So with that, sorry, I got my marching orders around here somewhere. One second. Okay, so I'm going to ask the staff to close this item at this moment.
Thank you, Borough President.
Thank you.
The item is closed.
So this hearing on the ULURP items is now closed, and I will review the application and submit my recommendations to the City Planning Commission, which will hold its own hearing on these items at a later date. Thank you for participating in tonight's public hearing. Viewers may submit additional comments by email to askreynoso@brooklynbp.nyc.gov. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much. Peace. And spread love. It's the Brooklyn way. Thank you all. The email is askbp. I'm going to put it on the chat. Right, it's on the chat. Sorry, Shelby. Hopefully we'll see you soon. Thank you. All right, take care. Officially now.